Okay, so we're going to talk about case study writing now so it's October 2016, so this is for the 16-17 academic year, okay? How I'm going to do it, I'm going to talk about the process of writing it, the actual details about how you send it in, how you get feedback. Then I'm going to talk about what you put in it, how that works, and then I think probably the best thing is if you ask questions, and then we'll get more ideas. I'll get some of your ideas about what you want to know, particularly about case studies. Does that sound all right? So as I'm going through, if you've got any questions, just ask them as I'm going through, because they will make sense at that moment. So don't hold back, just ask the questions as I'm going through. So we've changed the way that we do it this year, which is why it's useful for us to do this, but also so that you know what you're doing. The processes, so for the Year 2 case study, it's a 5,000 word document, and for Year 3 it's 6,000 words. And as you know, you can't start writing your case study until you've had a significant amount of work with clients. So we say in Year 2, really to have done about 60 hours, something like that, before you even begin to start thinking about it. That doesn't mean that you can't identify a client that you might want to write about. But you need some experience of clinical work before you start writing it. And then for your Year 3 case study, you'll be talking about a lot more hours than that, probably 200 and odd hours that you'll have done before you start writing that one. Okay? So the way that you do it is you need to identify a client. Now you need to have worked 12 hours with a client. And as you know, we've changed the placement agreement forms so that in placement now, in placements where you're doing short-term work, we say that you have to, on some occasion, be able to work, if appropriate, clinically appropriate, that you can work with someone for 12 hours. Okay? So as you are working with clients, begin to start thinking about whether they might be appropriate for you to write a case study on, and think about that whilst you're writing some notes, okay, that you might keep in a diary that you're writing, perhaps with other things, so that it doesn't form part of your therapeutic notes, but it's just some other notes that you might be writing that aren't part of your clinical notes, okay? As part of a diary or reflective journal, something that you might be writing. So start to think about and identify clients at some point. Then, when you are ready, you will talk to your program lead about it. So you get ready, you think, right, okay, I've done my hours, I'm thinking about it, I've done lots of notes, I'm thinking about the process. Talk to your program lead, and talk to your program lead about which client you're thinking of doing it about, and also talk to your supervisor about which client you're thinking about, because you will have taken that client to supervision. You will have already begun to identify themes, theories around that client. So discuss it with your supervisor. They're part of this process and an important part of the process. Okay? So when you're ready, you talk to your program lead about it, and what we will do then, your program lead will send you, or I will send you some examples. So we'll say, if you say, right, I'm ready to do my kit dip case study, then I'll send you a couple of examples to have a look at. Now they are only examples, and what we ask you to do is to read them and then just delete them. Not to keep them, alright? Read them, make some notes and then delete them, because you are holding on to someone else's work. And although we have the people's permission to show them to you, we don't want you keeping them forever. That's not okay. Okay? Because you're not publishing the work is staying within Matrix and it's not published, it's just a piece of work within Matrix, we ask that you don't tell the client that you're writing about them, because it might skew the work. Alright? So they don't need to know that you're writing about them. So the way it works is, you start with the first section, and I'm going to go on and tell you about what all the different sections have in them. So you start with the first section, so both Year 2 and Year 3, that first section is the philosophy, your integrative philosophy, and the process of counselling, how you do it. So what you believe about counselling, or integrative, the philosophy of the way that you work, and then how you do that in the room. I'm going to come back to talk about them in a minute. Okay? So you start with that. You write that. So that's about half of the case study. So what we're asking now is you write that, fully referenced, as if you were writing an essay, and then you send it in when it's done. Okay? So rough word count. You get the word count roughly right, and you send it to your program lead. It's the program lead that taught you in the year that you are writing the case study about. So if you're writing a Year 2 case study, you send it to your Year 2 program lead, whoever that was. You're writing it when you're in year 3, but you write it, send it to your year 2 programme lead, yeah?
So it needs to be about 3,000 words.
2.5.
2.5, right.
Probably 2.5, because it's got an introduction and conclusion as well. So roughly, that part will be about, 2,500, maybe 3,000 words. So you submit that, ready for marking, like you would an essay, okay? If you send it in, and you haven't formatted it right, you haven't proofread it, you haven't done your references right, we'll send it back, okay? We're not going to read it. We send it back and say, get the referencing right, follow the sheet, and we'll send it back to you. So if there's anything poor about the formatting or the proofreading, we'll just send it back and say, get that right before you read it, okay? Because we've found in the past that we do a significant amount of work around those things, and actually, we'd rather you did that and we didn't do so much work around that. Then what will happen is, your programme lead will give you comments. We'll send some comments back saying, I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned unconscious process. Or I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned, or you might want to mention more about your own personal counselling and what you've learned about it. Or you haven't mentioned supervision at all. Yeah? So they'll write broad things back. Or maybe you're sounding a bit too eclectic and try and put it together more in an integrative framework. So you'll get comments like that back. And so then you incorporate them in, rewrite it and send it back. Okay? When we think that part's ready, then we'll go, yeah, we think that's more or less ready. Then you write the case study part, which is the part about your client. Again, same kind of word count, 2,500 words. So you write about your client. The guidelines are in here, and I'm going to go through them in a minute. Okay? And then the same thing, you send it back. So it needs to be referenced, if you've put references in, theory in there. Correct? So you'll reference this now. So now we're having the whole document. So I'll have it, by then, you'll put it all together as one document. So then the whole document comes to us, because we've already checked the first part, and it's coming with the case study part on it too. Yeah? So then we have the whole thing there, and then we'll read it again and say, what you've written about doesn't, in your case study, doesn't match your philosophy enough. Okay? Or you've mentioned this in your case study. You've mentioned transaction analysis in your case study, and you spent 3 sessions, with them doing TA or showing them some TA information, and you haven't mentioned it in your philosophy. You have to mention it in your philosophy, because that's part of how you're working. It's one of your creative, it's one of your interventions, is to educate your client about TA. Yeah? So they're the kind of things we'll be looking for. How does it match? Does it match up? Does it feel integrative? So this is for year 2. I'm talking about year 2 now. So you do the philosophy and process of how you work. This is what I believe, this is how I do it. And then now, look, here it is. I'm doing it. I'm demonstrating it in action. This is me going, this is how I do it. This is how I did that intervention that I told you about up here. Yeah? And this is what happened. And then I have this problem, and I took it to my supervisor, discussed it with my supervisor. We discussed it, and then this is what happened. Took it back, worked, did something different, this is what happened. This is how it impacted the work. So it's all, and this is how I link the theory with my interventions, and the theory is what I'm doing. Yeah? So what we're looking for in the case study is how you link what happens in the room to the theory. So linking the practice to the theory is what we're demonstrating in this case study part.
One of the things I noticed when I'm reading text, in particular about cases that have case studies in it, is that they very much present an example of a theory
jobs you've had perhaps in the past, how your history has informed your choices and how you've ended up being a counsellor, yeah? And what you're drawn towards, what theories you're drawn towards. So that's the extra part that's in year 3. Obviously, if you were to write your year 2 case study and then you pick up your philosophy and you cut and paste it and plonk it in your year 3 philosophy, you could be accused of plagiarising yourself. Because it's a piece of work that you've already sent in, and if you cut and paste it, you are technically plagiarising yourself. And what we would expect in year 3 is that we see a real development of your philosophy, that your thinking has deepened, your way of working has deepened. So it's not a question of copying it across, but obviously there'll be a lot of themes in there. So if you work heavily with attachment theory, you're not going to suddenly change that when you get to year 3, but you might write more about the intersubjective, the relationship, how that works in the room, for instance. So we'll always be looking for a development of that, yeah? That makes sense? So the process, you get the process, you write it in sections, you send it in, we give you comments, and we send it back. So it's checking, the processes of checking. Once your program lead thinks it's ready for submission, it gets sent to me for a final check, all right? And then I have a look and go, I think you need to write a bit more about this, or you haven't written enough about this. So there's one final check, which is me. And then if I think, yeah, that's ready, then I'll say to you, yes, that's ready. Send me an email copy of the final version and a hard copy in the post. And once I get the hard copy in the post, that's you down for the next Viva. Okay, so the next Viva, whether we have the dates or not. So you don't have to write it to a deadline, you can write it when you like. And then as the Viva dates are set, then I'll tell people when the Vivas are. Okay? So you don't have to wait. Just get going with it if you're ready.
How does the Viva work, or are you coming to that? Because I'm not sure how.
Right, so I'll say that now. So what happens is, a month before, so the deadline is a month before the Viva, so I collect all of the hard copies of your case studies, I send them to the external examiner. The Viva works, so you arrive, at the moment we're doing them in Bury, Alison's practice in Bury, so you arrive 10 minutes before, you bring all of your portfolio of your client log, well actually because you'll have a portfolio Moodle, what we will just expect to see is your client logs and your supervision logs. And then you go in and you have for your dip Viva, it's about 30 to 40 minutes, and it's essentially what people say, it's like an extended supervision. She'll ask you about your case study, she'll ask you questions about it, and she'll ask you about theory, how you make links to theory. So all the way through be thinking, how do I make links to theory? And then she will assess you as a marking sheet, and you get assessed for year 2 and 3. So year 3 is very similar, except it's longer, it's an hour, with a different examiner. And again, ask you questions, she'll ask you about ethical, she might ask you how you've solved an ethical dilemma, she might ask you, how you work it, about a particular intervention that you've written about in your case study. And it's like a really long extended supervision about your case study. And what they're looking for, so the categories that you get marked on, is your capacity to develop a therapeutic relationship with your clients, that you show the appropriate use of counselling skills, that you can think theoretically about the work, that you can understand and value the integrative approach to counselling, so that you're able to talk about why you think integration works and why how you use it in practice, and appreciation of the nature and responsibilities of the counselling role. So that's kind of the ethics and your professional responsibilities. Okay, so that's what she's looking for, and that's what she'll be doing. After you have the Viva, she'll mark you. They will mark you. They tell you there and then if you passed or failed, and then then you get the matrix certificate after that. And then when you come to do your BSc one, you'll get the Matrix Advanced Diploma Certificate, and you get your Middlesex Certificate after the assessment board, which is in November every year. Okay? Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Jolly good. Right. So, I'm not saying in that final check, yeah, this is a pass, okay? Because I don't know what you're going to say in the Viva. If you do some big clanger about ethics or something like that, you won't pass. So I'm not saying it's a pass, I'm saying I've checked it and I think it is on a level to submit, all right? And if it keeps going backwards and forwards, and we keep saying, please do this, we think, well, please think about this, and you don't, then at some point we go, okay, we'll send it in and you can see how you get on, Okay, so it's not, we're not saying this is a pass, we're saying we think it's of a standard that you can send in. Yeah?
So, sorry, I've got one more question.
Yeah,
With the Viva, is it just you and the examiner in the room?
Yeah.
No one else?
No one else, but
No.
we do tape them. We tape them now in case there's any appeal. Because if you come out and say, she was really horrible to me, it's your word against her, so we do take them. So that then somebody external, probably it wouldn't be me, someone external to Matrix, if there was a problem, we would ask someone to listen to it and make a decision on that.
So it's not video, just tape?
No, just taped.
Yeah.
And the tapes don't get listened to. They just get put onto my computer, passworded to computer, and destroyed after 6 months. Because we think that if you're going to complain, you'd have said something by up to 6 months if you've got a problem with it. So then we go through and destroy them. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, on the handout, so it's info sheet 17 for year 2, and info sheet 18 for year 3. The guidelines for the case study, honestly, it's all here. Okay, it's all on there. So that's why sometimes it gets frustrating if you don't follow it, and we think, come on guys, it's on here. It says, you need a front page, and on the front page it says Matrix College case study, Diploma in Integrative Counselling, put your name and the month you submitted it. Okay, so that's we tell you. So when you send it in the first time, have that front page ready, do it, send the whole lot in as if you are sending that whole bit in to me. Then you have a contents page. Now, you'll have your contents page, but when you first send it in the first time, it will only have the contents for the first section, yeah? But the page number. So send it in as it's ready. Put the word count at the bottom of the contents page. Number it. Tells you all of this. Just follow it. Look at it. Follow it. So the main headings, as I've said, integrative philosophy. If you're doing your year 3 one, personal and professional development, case study, references. So they're your main ones. For each new section, you do a new page. It's got to look good. You know, you're sending it off to an external examiner, and you're saying, "This is me." So make it look good. Make it look neat. You know, take pride in it, because it's you're saying, "This is who I am as a counsellor in this bit of work." So I think it's really important. It tells you exactly how to do it, what font to do it. You know what we like. We like it all to be in a nice same font. We tell you what spacing to do it. We tell you use speech marks. You know when to use speech marks, when to use quotation marks. It's all on here. Okay? Then...
Is it the same as for essays?
Yeah. So the content, philosophy. So in the philosophy, what you're putting in the philosophy is things like... Now, what we've got down here are some bullet points just to give you some guidance. So it's just what you're doing is thinking about, what do I believe about human nature? How do I think people grow? What do I think goes wrong? Yeah? You're writing about those things, and how does that link with theory? So what theories do I inform me in those beliefs about myself? Yeah? What do I believe about trauma? How do I think that impacts people? Maybe you might want to think about, you know, attachment theories. And then what about psychopathology? You know, what do you think about, you know, labels that people are giving? Do you agree with them? Do you not agree with them? So you might write something in there, thinking about anti-oppressive practice, ethics. You couldn't write a case study without writing about ethics, could you, or supervision? So all of those things, it's like, what do I believe about how I do this job, about how I integrate? So it's about how, you know, all that we've taught you about integration is how do I pull down from 3 main theories, what do I pull down? What bits do I pull down? What are important? And then, why are they important? We want a bit of a showing of why they're important, particularly obviously in year 3, but equally in year 2 I think sometimes it doesn't help, it helps to say why are they important to you? Why do you work reparatively, for instance, if you do? You know, why do you think that's important? What links might you make with that? And within that integrative philosophy there is either a separate section or you can intermingle it all the way through, however you like, on the process. This is what I believe. These are the theories, and then this is how I do it in the room. So how do you, if you think that developing a working alliance is important, how do you do it? Yeah? If you think that working with the unconscious is important, how do you work with transference and counter-transference? Okay? So what is always curious is if somebody starts writing in their case study, well, you know, the pre-transference, my pre-transference from reading the assessment sheet was X, Y, and Z. And then I'm thinking, oh, pre-transference, that's really curious, because you didn't write about anything about unconscious process in your philosophy. So I didn't even know that you thought it was relevant. So if you're going to write about something in your case study, you have to have talked about it in your philosophy. Yeah? So if you would write about what you believe about the unconscious in your philosophy, and then you would write in the process of counselling how you work with transference and counter-transference, and then in your case study you would give an example of that. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah. Bit of nodding going on there.
Yeah.
How did what do you believe about change, and how do you work with that with your clients? How do you do it? So that section is like we're looking for how do you do it. So that's all part of your philosophy, and you can either weave it in as you go along. This is what I believe about unconscious process, and this is what I think about how I work with transference and counter-transference, or you can have it separately. We don't really mind, but as long as you've got a sense of how you work, what do you think about Clarkson? What different relationships do you think might be in the room at any one time in the work? Do you want to include that? Remember, you're adding theorists in your philosophy, definitely. We're expecting to see links to theory all the time, and correctly referenced. I don't really need to go on about that. At the end of that section, you write a lovely conclusion. So, this is what I believe, this is how I work. Thank you very much. Yeah? Then in your case study, you start writing about clients. So the first thing you do is say, this is my placement, this is where I work, this is where I work, this is the context, this is how we get referrals. Now, you do that very succinctly because you haven't got very many words. And my experience of reading a lot of case studies over the years is it's so easy to write that bit. Oh, you can write 1,000 words on your placement and that first session. And then you go, you've got another 1,000 words to write about the next 11 sessions. Okay, and that's balance then is wrong. So you have to learn to write very succinctly that first bit. I work at a placement that deals with pregnancy and loss. Assessments come from, people can either self-refer or they come from GPs. They've said it's open-ended, and the head of the organisation does the assessments. Yeah? That's all you need to write. I received the assessment form. Now, if you don't read them first, you say that. If you read them first, you say it. I saw this assessment. Oh my goodness, my pre-transference was this. Or if there was no pre-transference, you say, this is what I read about my client. Then they arrived and they were sitting with their coat on the whole time, and I was really curious about that. And I thought that, and then how you might link that back to theory, what you've written in your philosophy. What do you think about someone who didn't take their coat off? Or that's how you would write about it. So you write about the first session, your thoughts after the first session, and then what you would do is how did you make your own assessment in that first session? Because of course, even if someone else has assessed the client, you'll be making your own assessment. So what was my own assessment of that? What did I think? How did I think the work might unfold? What was the nature of the work going to be? Is the client suitable for counselling? If you write, this client had a psychiatric history this long and had recent suicide attempts, then I would expect you to have done some kind of risk assessment and talk to your supervisor. Yeah? And you say, I did a risk assessment, talked to my supervisor, and blah, 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 and we decided it was okay to work with them. Yeah? So, all those sorts of things. And you wouldn't write that without linking it to theory, would you? You would add in, maybe how you would do, how would you reference something like that? Who might you think about, might write about something like that? Who writes about ethics? Who writes about suicide?
Tim Bond.
Tim Bond. So you would reference Bond, you would look up, what does Bond say about suicidal risk? So you would put that in. And of course you would have written then, you might get to the point where you're writing a case study and think, oh no, I didn't write that in my philosophy. So you might go back into your process of counselling and add a bit. If you do that, highlight it so that the person reading it can know that, because if I've read a case study and I've finished that bit and I think that's done, and if you add a bit, then I might not know to check it, so highlight it and go, I've added a bit, I forgot to write about, suicide risk or something, I've added a bit in there, yeah?
So, how do you refer to your client? Do you refer to
good question.
Yeah, a number or give
them a pseudonym and you write, my client Jack, brackets, a pseudonym. I think you need to write that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't write that, I get in a bit of a panic when I'm reading it thinking, was that their real name? Yeah, so I would always put, I've chosen to call this client Jack. But then I think you haven't got enough words. You don't have the luxury to say, I have chosen to call this client Jack because I want those 5 extra words to be telling me something about theory. So just really short, succinct stuff. Honestly, you've got a lot to write. You do it in a snappy way at the beginning. Don't write my client. It's really clunky. Right, Jack said this, Jack said that. When Jack came in on the 3rd session, he was soaking wet and I was really curious about how he was looking after himself. My thoughts turned to the reparative relationship and I felt myself wanting to mother him. Brackets, Clarkson, you know, can you see that's how you do it? Yeah, and I wondered about transference, so then I went and spoke to my supervisor and she said this and then we did this. So that's how you start to do it, okay? But you're putting that in. Now, if you haven't written about reparative, I'll be thinking, what? Write it in the top bit. Yeah, write it in the beginning. So that's it. So you write about them. You write about their history, their family history. I think, please, write in the past tense. It just reads better. All the way through, don't change tenses. That really drives me mad when people do that. So write in the past tense. It just is easier to read. Yeah. You'd be writing about how you set the obviously rewind a bit to the first session. How you set the contract with them. Please don't go on about it for absolutely ages. For 500 words. Like show us you know that you have to do it, but we know that you've probably shown them the bit from your placement where you have to read the thing. You don't need to spell it all out, because what I want to know is how you've worked with them. Much more interested in that. So just say, we did the contracts, you know, we sorted out. You don't need to say, and they agreed to pay £10 a week. You know, it's just get it succinct. It's really important, because we just want we want the bones of that bit, and then we want the meat of what you're talking about, okay? So, yeah.
Sorry. In the process of doing the first section of the case study and then going on to do the second section, there's a period of time where you might still be working with the client and you may have a feeling change about what you said in the first thing.
Absolutely.
And you could go back and write something and change something in the first section. So that's sort of okay, even though you passed it?
Yeah, but then you need to make sure that someone reads it again.
Okay.
So I would say it's probably unlikely to do that because you'd have probably been reflecting and had worked with that client for a while.
Yes.
It's unlikely that would happen.
But
if you add, well, you might read something else and you might talk to someone, you know, and talk to your supervisor and add a bit in. But if you do that, make sure the reader knows that you've done that. Okay, just so it gets checked.
I'm very aware my feelings change a lot as I'm going along.
And I don't mind that at all. But if everybody expects me to start, if I'm checking it and I have to keep starting at the beginning, can you imagine how many of these I do? You know, I have to get up early to do these when there's a deadline coming. And it takes a long time to read through them. Now, if I know I've read through a bit and checked it, I am not going to read. And you send me another bit, and I think, oh, it's all new, and I start again, and I've already done it. You know, it doesn't go down well. So just think about the reader. So if you say, Fiona, can you read this bit? I've added this bit in. Then I might read around it to make sure it fits in well, but I will only read that bit because I know the rest is okay. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's only, I mean, when we're checking, all we're doing is checking to see that you're doing the process right. I mean, in a way, we're not saying this is going to pass or fail. We're just saying, remember to put all of these bits in. Yeah, or that makes sense. It's just we're giving you guidance so that you write to the best of your ability. We can't tell you what to write, and we don't tell you what to write. We just say, remember to write about supervision. Yeah?
Could I ask a question? If you've had a bit of a rupture with your supervisor, would that be all right to mention?
Yeah, you can put it theoretically as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it might be really interesting. You might have learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't make it sound eclectic. You know, it's integrative. You've got to show your philosophy. It's all got to hang together. I did a bit of TA with them on Tuesday because that's what I felt like. And then the following week, I was just focusing on the transference, right? Just don't, trying to show how it all fits together and how you're linking theory. In your process of counselling, if you use creative interventions, then put the theoretical your theory behind using interventions, and then you can say, I've got him to draw, and this is what happened. But don't just say, I've got him to draw. If you say, I work in a person-centred way. Right, so if you write, I work in a person-centred way in the philosophy, and then you say, I've got him to draw in a session. I gave him a piece of paper and some pens. I'll be sitting there thinking, doesn't sound like the essence of person-centred work, So you wouldn't write your person-centred, you might follow humanistic principles, but that's not, you know, so you've got to be quite precise. Yeah? Obviously don't forget supervision, as I've said, and then you conclude it with a summary. This is my wonderful piece of work that I did with this client. And then I think what you have to do, it's very important at the end, what have you learned? You know, because we're teaching you to be reflective counsellors, so we want you to put what you've learned. Okay? About yourself. Not just about theory. What have you learned about yourself from working with this client? And then obviously a beautiful reference list at the end, in alphabetical order, all absolutely correct. The other thing that's very interesting is sometimes I think, you know, I'll go through seagull, please spell seagull right. That's the one everyone spells seagull wrong. Spell seagull, spell things
Are they
right.
spelling it like the bird?
Yeah, that'd be funny, wouldn't it? No, they get the I and the E wrong right now. Seagull is a common spelling mistake. But remember that the only things that go in your reference list are what that we've referenced in the actual text. So don't put lots of books in there that you've read just to show that you're clever. You only reference what you've referenced in the text, okay? So you don't need bibliography. So how does that sound?
Daunted.
You have to be organised.
It's a bit easier.
Yeah.
I think you have to be organised and you have to get a structure. But allow, you know, you can allow your creative side to come through, but you haven't got a lot of words. So, and I absolutely, it's very, what we don't want is everyone's case study sounding the same. You know, it's like we want people to be really creative, or creative. You don't have to follow this. I mean, this is a guideline. You can do it kind of how you like, as long as you get the main points in. And the idea of us checking is to say, just to check really that you've got the main points in. Just to say, yeah, great, you're on the right lines. Maybe add a bit, I'm curious about this, you didn't say this, or whatever. You know, perhaps it's just to sort of help you really showcase your work. That's why we check. Any other questions?
Yes, I'm still need to do my year 2 case study, but I'm in year 3 now.
Yeah.
So is it alright to use a client I'm working with now? It doesn't have to be one I was working with in
It doesn't have to be one that you're working with in year 2. It can be a current client. And if you're ever not, as I said at the beginning, if you're not sure about which client to choose, talk to your supervisor and talk to us, okay? Because what you don't want to choose is somebody really complicated, because that, you know, but some placements is really difficult because there isn't a client that's not complicated. So you want to choose, you know, you want to choose a client where what we're trying to do is get you to showcase your beliefs and ideas about integration, yeah? So that's the main thing. It's like it's a showcase of who you are and how you work. Yeah, so we want you to show that you're working responsibly, ethically, and you can think about theory, and that you've got a coherent integration, that it all fits together and it fits together with who you are. And that's what we want to see. Okay.
So how long do we get to do it? Is there a deadline?
Well, there's a deadline at the very end.
Yeah.
So once you finish the taught aspect of all 3 years, you've got a year to finish both. Okay. So we give you to the following November assessment board. So if you finished the taught aspect of the course in July 2017, you have till the assessment board, but remember the Viva's at least usually before the assessment board, so you'll have till probably October 2018 to have finished both and have submitted them.
Okay.
Okay. If you have got a very good reason why you can't do that in that time, then you can always apply to me or the head of training and say this is the reason why, but we expect you to do it in a year, because otherwise it drags on and you know. Yeah.
And that's the final deadline for both of them. There isn't
Yes,
any
both of
year
them.
2. Okay.
No, it's both of them. So you have to get a shifty on.
Yeah.
It feels like a very important part of this course.
It's a huge part because what it does is it solidifies your learning.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is all, you're learning all the theory, you're doing your client work, and it just pulls it all together. It's really important. And of course, it is a snapshot of your philosophy at that point, and a snapshot of your philosophy in year 3. If I was to write my case study now, a case study and a philosophy of my work now, it would be different to one I wrote 5 years ago, because I've changed. You know, personally I've changed. The reading I've done has changed. The way that I work with my clients will have subtly changed. So it's a snapshot. It's not a, and I think that's important to remember. It's a snapshot. It's not this is who I am and this is how I work and I will work like this forever. It's a snapshot of where you are in that moment. And we expect it to change and grow. And when you get your UKCP registration, and in your 5 years, every 5 years you have to re-register, we ask you to write about your integration and where have you, and they're fascinating stories reading how people have developed over the 5 years, you know, and how their integration has changed, and a lot of people have gone off and done extra trauma work, or, you know, and how they incorporate that into their philosophy. So it will be it's a dynamic thing, your philosophy, and it will be forever changing.
One more question.
Yeah.
Who are the assessors outside people?
The external assessors for the diploma, it's Pat Bryant, who is a tutor at Metanoia. She does the diploma ones. Oh no, she's not a tutor at Metanoia anymore. She was a tutor at Metanoia. I think she's not anymore, but anyway, she's very experienced. Very experienced. And then for the BSc, it's Helen Jane Ridgway, who is a current tutor at Metanoia. So they're experts in the field of integration.
And the body that they represent is just themselves, or?
Well, they're representing. They are examining really for Middlesex University and for Matrix. So they're examining for us to say yes, you have reached the required standard. Well, no, you haven't. You need to go and do a bit more work and resubmit your case study.